supposed to be used for national security events, but Joe Biden has sold nearly 40% of our stockpile since being elected. In fact, Joe Biden has sold off more of our oil reserves than every U.S. president in history combined. Today, our crucial emergency oil reserves are at the lowest level in my lifetime. As a result, China now has the world's largest government-controlled stockpile of oil, and Joe Biden and his administration have no plan to reverse course. Under an open rule, this week, House Republicans will continue to implement our commitment to America. This week, we will pass a bill to prevent abuse of the SPR and require Joe Biden to put forth a plan to increase domestic production. It is long past time to unleash American energy and restore our standing on the world stage. House Republicans will hold the Biden administration accountable for tying the hands of America's oil and gas producers in the midst of an energy crisis. We will deliver on our promise to defend our energy security, to support an economy that's strong. And with that, I want to yield to one of our members who is very active on energy issues, August Pfluger from Texas.
President Biden has sent a clear message to oil and gas workers across the country. He said your jobs don't matter. He said your mortgage payments don't matter, and your children's education and putting food on the table don't matter. In fact, remember when the president, as he was campaigning, said that he would end the fossil fuel industry. He's used his own political emergencies to drain the SPR to its lowest levels in 40 years. The SPR is intended for emergencies, national security emergencies, weather emergencies. It's intended to be a reserve to help the American people, the American economy, in the case of emergencies. But we have watched him, the president, shackle U.S. producers with needless regulations while going abroad and begging other people, including our adversaries, for our own needs that we can do right here. This Republican majority knows, like I said, that we're not in a transition, we're in an expansion. And we're going to work to restore American energy security. We're going to allow our industry to provide affordable, reliable energy to every American, instead of what the president has done, which is weaponize the EPA, weaponize FERC, weaponize every regulatory agency and department in his administration against the energy industry. I'd like to ask, where are my Democrat colleagues? Where are my Democrat colleagues from Texas to stand up for affordable, reliable energy? Not only is this a national security imperative, but the energy industry allows our economy to continue to grow strong. That's the biggest tool we can use to regain our standing on the world stage. Where are my colleagues who want to ease the burden of inflation that the president has caused for the past 2 years? It's time to regain energy dominance, to meet the growing demands that our economy and our national security so desperately need. Every week we like to highlight a freshman member, and I'd like to introduce my colleague, my good friend, the gentlelady from Oregon, Ms. Lori Chavez-DeRemo.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be before you as one of the majority makers, and as a mom, and as a business owner, and as a mayor. These issues matter. They matter to Oregonians, and they matter to Americans. Due to the poor energy policies, we've gone from energy independent to energy dependent, and that's what we want to avoid. And in order to do that, we have to have a plan. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is intended for emergencies. Nearly 40% of the stockpile is now gone, the lowest level we've seen in 40 years. It was the largest drawdown in U.S. history. It's clear that Congress needs to act. The people who elected us expect us to have a plan. That's what mayors do. That's what congressional leaders do. Failing to do so leaves us vulnerable. Natural disasters and national emergencies in the future. We have to be prepared. The Strategic Production Response Act requires us a plan that Oregonians asked us to pay attention to, that Americans asked us to pay attention to. Domestic energy production, if the SPR is tapped, for those non-emergency purposes. I'm very proud as a freshman legislator to co-sponsor this bill. It's an important step forward in restoring our energy security. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Tom Emmer.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori. Little change of pace. It's been made clear over the past week that House Republicans are going to have to be proactive and take the lead on debt ceiling negotiations. As usual, in the swamp, everyone else wants to pass the buck. But Republicans ran and won in 2022 on reining in reckless federal spending. So we're ready to negotiate. It would be a grave mistake for Democrats and the man in the Oval Office to dig their heels in on such an important issue. It's time for Joe Biden to come to the bargaining table. It's responsible, it's sensible, and it's reasonable. House Republicans are waiting, and we're ready. And I turn it over to the Majority Leader, Steve Scalise.
Thank you, Whip Emmert. I'm real excited to see that y'all get the opportunity to meet some of our new freshmen, some of the majority makers, and Lori Chavez de Reamer is one of those happy warriors from Happy Valley. She was the mayor of Happy. We wanted to jettison the approach that Speaker Pelosi took, where she shut down the ability for even committee chairs to be involved in addressing problems. Bills were written out of her office. She wouldn't even let chairmen amend major pieces of legislation in committees, not allowing rank and file members the ability to have an input in how the process works. And so this week you're going to see another example of us opening things up, an open rule, something we haven't seen in 7 years here in Congress on the Strategic Petroleum Reserve Bill that says if the president's going to raid SPRO, not during emergencies, but just in normal times, he at least has to show a plan for how he would replenish it. If you're going to take something away, you should show people how you're going to refill it. And what was interesting is that the president issued a veto threat on this bill yesterday. And it's important that you read the veto threat to understand just how misguided President Biden's approach to energy is. And in the veto threat, he actually said that his policies of raiding SPRO have led to lower gas prices. Now, I don't know if the calculator is broken at the White House, but since Joe Biden's been in office, we've seen a 40% increase in gas prices. That's not lowering, it's actually increasing so dramatically that it's hurting hardworking families. It's one of the reasons that you pay more for everything when you go to the grocery store, when you go to the shopping mall. Anything you buy now costs more money because of Joe Biden's policies, and he's trying to claim that that's actually lowered costs when in fact it's increased costs. And families know that. They know if you have bad energy policy, it makes our country less safe. It's not like we're using less energy. We're actually using more energy. It's just now we become more reliant on foreign countries. There's no reason for that. We have the most abundant supply of energy here in America. And by the way, if you're concerned about carbon emissions, and from the sound of all those private jets going to Davos last week, it seems like those faux conservationists seem to like talking in foreign countries about it, but they don't practice it here in America. Nobody makes energy in the world cleaner than the United States of America. So stop flying Air Force One to Saudi Arabia and other countries begging Russia to produce energy when we can make it here cleaner, better, lowering the cost, and creating really good jobs in America. But in the meantime, we've got a strategic petroleum reserve for a reason. It's there for emergencies. It's not there to mask the president's bad energy policies. It's there in times of need, and this president's raided more than 40% of that reserve. This bill just says if you're going to raid the reserve, show a plan on how you're going to replenish it. And why the White House would issue a veto threat on that boggles, I think, the mind of most common sense people. But unfortunately, that's what we've seen commonplace from this administration. Obviously, there are a lot of other issues like the debt ceiling that the whip talked about that we are deeply interested in solving. But with that, I'd be happy to take your questions. Yeah.
Thanks so much. I was just wondering about the select subcommittee on COVID, and if you could comment on when those hearings are expected to start, and also, will they be building on the work that you and Representative Jordan, Representative Rogers, and McCall did on this issue in the previous Congress?
I'm glad you recognize how important that work was that we did last year. Look, I've talked to now Chairman Wenstrup, or Brad Wenstrup was just formally named as the chairman yesterday. I think that word went out, and we've appointed our members. Obviously, the Democrats need to appoint their members, so the committee is ready to start working. But once they get fully constituted, like all of our committees, with both Republicans and Democrats, they're going to go to work. But there are a lot of important issues, and I know we tried to address them in the last Congress, things like the origins of COVID. And of course, the Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus will be one of those committees. Energy and Commerce, a number of other committees will have jurisdiction as well. But we're going to be asking those questions. We never got the right answers on the number of nursing home deaths that occurred in those states that went against the CDC guidance on how to take care properly of people in nursing home. Thousands. In New York alone, a minimum of 13,000 people died that never should have. But the number from what we've heard from people on the ground is a lot higher than that. But the governor's never released that data. So we obviously want to get answers for families, and that's what that committee will be focused on.
On Schiff and Swalwell, Democrats are characterizing this move by Leader McCarthy to keep them off of Intel as nothing but political vengeance. Wondering in response to that. And then secondly, do you know if Republicans are going to have the votes to keep Ilhan Omar off of Foreign Affairs?
Well, with all of those members you talked about, they're very specific things that they've done in their time here in Congress. I don't even think Swalwell could get a security clearance in the private sector. So why should he be on the Intelligence Committee? I mean, these committees are very unique in that they deal with our national secrets. They deal with very classified information. And if people have shown a propensity to either espouse anti-American, anti-Semitic views, do things that have put themselves in a compromised position, including lying about classified information, it raises serious questions. And again, those are very unique committees. You get access to a lot of classified information. There are a lot of members on the Democrat side that don't have those kind of conflicts. And I know the Speaker has urged Hakeem Jeffries to appoint people that don't have those conflicts.
Are the votes there to keep Omar off of Foreign Affairs, though?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, we'll see if they appoint her, but we have no intention of having them serve on those committees. Yeah.
I was hoping Chairwoman Survive might be able to answer this with your intel background. The classified documents were found in Vice President Mike Pence's home. Are House Republicans planning to investigate that, or do you see a difference in how President Biden and Pence have handled their classified document situation?
I think the facts are important here, and rather than reading this through the lens of the headlines, getting to the facts are important. In the case of Vice President Mike Pence, he came forward and proactively reached out and is following the process. In the case of Joe Biden, he has had classified documents going back to his time in the Senate, where he started serving before I was born. So this is a long-standing national security threat, setting aside the very important fact that Hunter Biden also had access and used as his home address where those classified documents were improperly and illegally stored. This will be a part of the oversight agenda, and on the House Intelligence Committee, we absolutely want to make sure we have all of the facts.
Is there a concern, we've seen it with former President Donald Trump, with Biden, with Pence, that some of the top leaders just aren't handling classified information at all? Should there be some sort of reforms with how the top leaders have access to that information?
Well, let's highlight the difference here in what the consequences have been. You had the FBI raid Mar-a-Lago. You did not see any of that happen for President Joe Biden, who illegally did this. What also is different is President Trump, as president, has the right to declassify documents. So the media should cover the fact that the FBI has been weaponized against President Trump and clearly has covered up for sitting President Joe Biden.
And to finish up on that, now we'll go to other questions, but to finish up on that, number one, President Trump had been working with National Archives and put those documents under lock and key that the FBI then broke through to go get those, and then leaked photos. They laid the documents out on the floor and they leaked photos out. Anybody asked where the leaked photos of the Vice President at the time Biden's documents that he had in his garage. I haven't seen those leaked photos, and also the fact that Justice had that information prior to the election and sat on it. And covered it up until after the election. There are a lot of questions, obviously, that are raised where there are big differences. Yeah, we'll go over to this side.
Mr. Leader, if you could talk at all, I know you mentioned debt ceiling, but how seriously are Republicans considering any form of entitlement reform, a national sales tax? Where are you on those discussions, specifically in terms of cuts in these negotiations around the debt ceiling?
Well, what we've been very concerned about is, number one, the debt ceiling is a symptom of the bigger Washington spending problem. And Joe Biden, for the last 2 years, went on a spending spree, the likes of which our country has never seen. $5 trillion in spending, a lot of it under the guise of COVID that had nothing to do with COVID. Doing things like paying people not to work, where you have millions of people right now who are sitting at home that are fully capable of working and getting $30,000, $40,000 in government benefits. That, by the way, undermines Social Security, because if those millions of people were working, they'd be paying into Social Security, helping shore that program up, which, by the way, we strongly believe that Social Security needs to be strengthened for seniors who paid into it. What President Biden did, paying people not to work, actually undermined Social Security and expedited its bankruptcy. But the bigger question is, can we get spending under control in Washington? And if the nation's credit card, which is the debt ceiling, gets maxed out, you've got a few questions. The first is, number one, I think most families, if they max out their credit card, they're going to sit down and have a conversation about how to responsibly deal with the problem. If you're taking in less money than you're spending, that's the problem. We're taking in, by the way, $1 and spending $1.29 in Washington. So for every dollar we take in, Washington's spending $1.29. That's not sustainable. And so for President Biden to say we can't even have that conversation, that's irresponsible. And so what Speaker McCarthy has said is, let's go sit down and have an honest conversation about how to solve this problem. If Washington is spending too much money, is there not some money that President Biden can identify that's wasteful in Washington? We've laid out some real good examples. There are hundreds of billions of dollars of COVID money that are being misspent, payments that are going to people that don't even have Social Security numbers in foreign countries.